You hear the term the cloud thrown around all the time, right? But what does it actually mean? It sounds so abstract, kind of mysterious. Well, what if I told you it's actually as simple and fundamental as a utility you use every single day? So let's pull back the curtain and really demystify cloud computing, once and for all.
Just think about electricity for a second. When you want to make toast, you don't build a power plant in your backyard, right? Of course not. You just plug in your toaster and you pay for the juice you use. That is the revolutionary idea behind the cloud, transforming computing from a product you have to own and manage into a service you just consume on demand. And this shift in models is absolutely crucial. You see, in the old way, if you were a company, you had to buy these big, expensive physical servers. Then you had to find a place to put them, power them, cool them, and hire a whole team of people to manage them. It was a massive upfront cost and a huge headache. The cloud way, from providers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, flips that completely on its head. Instead of buying, you're essentially renting the exact computing power you need for exactly as long as you need it.
Now, if you want to get a little more formal about it, this is the official definition from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, and I want you to notice the key phrases in there: on demand, shared pool, and rapidly provisioned. In other words, it's all about getting what you need right when you need it from a giant shared collection of resources, just like flicking that light switch.
But that begs the question, right? How in the world can these giant providers offer this shared pool of resources to literally millions of customers all at the same time? Well, the answer comes down to one absolutely transformative technology. It's called virtualization. And yeah, it's pretty much magic. Let's get into how it works.
So virtualization is the secret sauce of the cloud. It's this incredibly clever technique that lets you take one single, powerful physical server and digitally slice it up so it can be shared by a whole bunch of different users. Each user gets their own isolated virtual machine, or VM, that looks and feels exactly like its own private computer, even though, behind the scenes, it's sharing the hardware with others.
And this gives you a great visual of how that happens. See, at the bottom, you have the actual physical server, the metal box with the processor, memory, and storage. Then, sitting right on top of that is a special layer of software called a hypervisor. You can think of the hypervisor as the traffic cop. It's what does the slicing and dicing, making sure each of those virtual machines at the top gets the resources it needs and stays completely separate from its neighbors. This is the engine that makes the cloud so incredibly efficient.
Okay, so now we know how the cloud works its magic. Let's look at what you can actually get from it. Cloud services are usually bundled in three main flavors: infrastructure, platform, and software. The best way to think about it is like a menu, where you get to pick just how much you want to manage yourself.
First up on the menu is Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS. This is the most foundational level. You're basically renting the raw ingredients of IT: the virtual servers, the storage, the networking. This gives you the most control, but it also means you're responsible for managing more stuff, like the operating system and the software you install.
Now, moving one level up, you have Platform as a Service, or PaaS. This isn't just the raw parts. This is more like a fully equipped workshop for developers. The cloud provider handles all the underlying servers, operating systems, and all that backend stuff. That means developers can just show up and focus on what they do best: writing, testing, and running their applications.
And finally, we get to the one you're probably most familiar with, even if you don't know the name: Software as a Service, or SaaS. These are the finished products, the ready-to-use applications you access over the internet, usually right in your web browser. We're talking about things like Google Drive, or Office 365, or Salesforce. You don't manage anything, you just use the software.
And this little table just sums it all up perfectly. As you go down the list from IaaS to PaaS to SaaS, you see a really clear shift in who's responsible for what. You manage less, and the cloud provider manages more. With IaaS, you're basically the system administrator. With PaaS, you're the developer. And with SaaS, you're just the end user. Simple as that.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the how, but where is all this stuff actually located? Where does it all live? That brings us to the different ways a cloud can actually be deployed.
Broadly speaking, you've got three main models. A public cloud is what we've mostly been talking about, that massive infrastructure owned by a provider like Amazon that's open for anyone to use. Then you have a private cloud, which is the same idea, but it's built exclusively for one single organization. And finally, you've got a hybrid cloud, which lets a company get the best of both worlds, maybe keeping super sensitive data on their private cloud while using the massive power of the public cloud for everything else.
So with all these services and all these models, What's the big payoff? Why is pretty much every business on the planet moved to the cloud in some way? Let's take a quick look at the huge benefits and, to be fair, a few of the challenges. Man, the list of advantages is pretty compelling. First off, cost. You get to trade those huge upfront expenses for hardware for a predictable monthly operating cost. Then there's speed and global scale. You can deploy applications to users all over the world in minutes, not weeks or months. And all of that leads to more productive teams who have access to incredible levels of performance, reliability, and security.
But if there is one single benefit that truly changed the entire game, it's this one: elasticity. See, the cloud gives you the illusion of infinite resources. If your website suddenly goes viral and gets 1 million visitors, the cloud can automatically spin up more servers to handle that load. Then, when the traffic dies down, it scales right back down. You only ever pay for what you actually use. That kind of flexibility is it's revolutionary.
Of course, it's not a perfect solution for everything. Handing over your data and your applications to a third party raises some serious security and privacy questions. Sometimes you can get locked in to one provider's platform, and you are, at the end of the day, depending on them to keep the lights on. These are all really critical things for any organization to think about.
So from the apps on your phone to the movies you stream at night, the cloud has become this invisible backbone of our entire digital world. It's a utility, just like electricity, that has unlocked an unbelievable wave of innovation. And the most exciting part is that these incredibly powerful building blocks are now accessible to anyone, from a single developer in their garage to a massive global corporation. The only question left is, what are you going to build with it?